November 1923. Germany was collapsing. Prices were rising so fast that people needed wheelbarrows full of money just to buy bread. In some cities, burning stacks of banknotes was actually cheaper than buying firewood. Millions lost their life savings. Businesses failed. Unemployment exploded. And across the country, many believed Germany would never recover. But history had other plans. Because only a decade later, Germany had transformed itself into one of the most powerful nations in Europe. Its army was expanding at an astonishing rate. Modern tanks rolled off factory lines. Powerful aircraft filled the skies. And a vast industrial machine was once again roaring to life. The question is, how? How did a nation standing on the edge of economic ruin suddenly become strong enough to challenge Europe? Was it an economic miracle? A brilliant recovery? Or was it something far more dangerous? Hidden beneath the surface, behind the speeches, the parades, and the promises, a secret financial system was taking shape. A system designed to rebuild Germany, rearm Germany, and ultimately prepare Germany for war. Today, we uncover the hidden financial machinery that helped Adolf Hitler rebuild a broken nation, and why that same system would help drive Europe toward one of the deadliest conflicts in human history.
Meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt eine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
To understand Hitler's rise, we first need to understand Germany's disaster. After the First World War, Germany was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty placed the blame for the war on Germany and demanded enormous reparations. The German government struggled to meet these crushing financial obligations. To cover its expenses, it began printing more and more money. The consequences were catastrophic. Germany soon experienced one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in modern history. In early 1923, one US dollar was worth around 18,000 German marks. But by November of that same year, $1 was worth more than 4 trillion marks. Prices changed by the hour. Workers were paid multiple times a day because their wages could become nearly worthless before sunset. Families who had spent decades building their savings suddenly discovered that a lifetime of hard work could barely buy a single loaf of bread. Eventually, Germany succeeded in stabilizing its currency. But before the nation could fully recover, another disaster arrived: the Great Depression. Beginning in 1929, banks collapsed. Businesses shut their doors. Economic activity ground to a halt. By 1932, nearly 6 million Germans were unemployed. Across the country, fear, anger, and hopelessness spread rapidly. People were desperate for change. And in moments of desperation, history often takes dangerous turns. For Germany, that desperation created an opportunity for one man: Adolf Hitler. Suddenly discovered that a lifetime of hard work could barely buy a single loaf of bread. Eventually, Germany succeeded in stabilizing its currency. But before the nation could fully recover, another disaster arrived: the Great Depression. Beginning in 1929, banks collapsed. Businesses shut their doors. Economic activity ground to a halt. By 1932, nearly 6 million Germans were unemployed. Across the country, fear, anger, and hopelessness spread rapidly. People were desperate for change. And in moments of desperation, history often takes dangerous turns. For Germany, that that desperation created an opportunity for one man, Adolf Hitler.
When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, he made a promise to the German people. A promise of jobs. A promise of national pride. A promise of economic recovery. And a promise of military strength. For millions of Germans struggling through years of hardship, it sounded like the future they had been waiting for. But there was a problem. A very big problem. The Treaty of Versailles imposed strict limits on Germany's military. Germany was not supposed to build a large army. It was forbidden from openly producing tanks, warplanes, or submarines. And there was another obstacle: money. Germany's finances were still fragile. The scars of hyperinflation had not been forgotten. Launching a massive military expansion risked triggering another economic disaster. So the question was simple.
How could Hitler secretly rebuild Germany's military without alarming the world and without causing a new financial crisis at home? The answer came from an extraordinary economist, a man named Hjalmar Schacht. Schacht understood that conventional methods would not work. Germany needed money it did not have, and it needed to hide what it was doing. What he created was neither a weapon nor a machine. It was a financial system. A system so unusual, so carefully designed, that it allowed Germany to fund a massive military buildup while keeping much of it hidden from public view. It became known as one of the most ingenious financial schemes of the 20th century, and it would play a crucial role in Germany's path toward war. Schacht's solution was remarkably simple and extraordinarily clever. He created a company known as MEFO. Officially, MEFO was a research company, but in reality, it was something very different. The company existed mostly on paper, a financial instrument designed to hide what Germany was really doing. When German factories produced tanks, weapons, and military equipment, the government often didn't pay them with cash. Instead, it issued something called MEFO Bills. At first glance, these bills appeared to be ordinary financial notes issued by a private company. But behind the scenes, they carried the backing of the German government. In effect, they were government promises disguised as private debt. Factory owners accepted them willingly because they knew the state stood behind every bill. And if they needed money immediately, they could take those bills to private banks. The banks exchanged them for real cash.
Then, quietly, Germany's central bank supported the entire system from behind the curtain. The arrangement achieved something extraordinary. It allowed the Nazi government to fund a massive military buildup without openly printing huge amounts of money and without immediately attracting international attention. Even more importantly, it helped conceal the true scale of Germany's military spending from foreign governments. Year after year, the system expanded. Between 1934 and 1938, billions of Reichsmarks flowed through MEFO. Factories grew larger, production lines multiplied, weapons manufacturing accelerated, and unemployment fell dramatically. To many ordinary Germans, it looked like an economic miracle. A nation that had once been crippled by crisis now appeared stronger than ever. But appearances can be deceptive, because beneath the surface, a dangerous problem was growing. A very big problem. MEFO bills were not magic. They were debt. Debt that had been delayed, hidden, and pushed into the future. But debts do not disappear. Sooner or later, someone has to pay. And when that moment arrived, Germany would face a choice that could change the course of history.
The MEFO system had achieved its purpose. It bought Germany time. But time was not the same as a solution. Beneath the appearance of recovery, Germany's fundamental economic problems remained. The nation depended heavily on imports: oil, rubber, industrial raw materials, even food. These were resources Germany could not easily produce for itself, and obtaining them required something Germany desperately lacked: foreign currency. The problem was simple. Germany was not earning enough through exports.
Yet the demand for imported resources continued to grow. At the same time, the military buildup showed no signs of slowing down. Factories kept producing, weapons kept rolling off assembly lines, and the government's financial obligations continued to expand.
Behind the scenes, billions of Reichsmarks had been borrowed through the MEFO system, and those debts were approaching maturity. Soon, the bills would have to be paid. Germany now faced a difficult choice. It could print more money and risk repeating the nightmare of hyperinflation. Or it could find another source of wealth, another source of resources, another source of economic power. And it was at this moment that economics and expansion became deeply connected. For Adolf Hitler, the solution increasingly seemed to lie beyond Germany's borders. He believed Germany needed more land, more resources, more control over its economic future. This idea became known as Lebensraum, living space. To many supporters, it was presented as a vision of national growth. But beneath the slogans lay a harsh economic reality. Expansion was not driven only by ideology. It was also fueled by economic pressure. A growing military, mounting debt, resource shortages, and a regime searching for a way to sustain itself. The financial system that had helped rebuild Germany was now pushing the country toward a far more dangerous path. A path that would soon reshape Europe and change the course of world history.
Germany's search for resources had moved beyond financial engineering. Now, expansion was becoming reality. That year, Germany annexed Austria. The political victory was significant, but so were the economic rewards. Austria brought valuable gold reserves, foreign currency, industrial assets, and financial resources that strengthened the German economy. Soon after, attention turned to Czechoslovakia, then Poland. And with each new conquest, Germany acquired something it desperately needed: resources, factories, labor, and economic assets.
As the Reich expanded across Europe, its military machine gained access to enormous amounts of wealth. But this wealth came at a terrible human cost. Occupied nations were forced to support Germany's war effort. Factories were redirected toward military production. Resources were seized and transported to Germany. And millions of people found themselves living under occupation. Many were subjected to forced labor, their work helping sustain a war economy they never chose to serve. For a time, the system appeared to work. The military grew stronger, production increased, and Germany continued advancing across Europe. To many observers, the strategy seemed unstoppable. But there was a weakness hidden at its core. The entire system depended on one thing: continuous expansion, continuous conquest, continuous victory. And history has shown.
So, was Hitler's Germany an economic miracle? The answer is more complicated than it first appears. Yes, unemployment fell. Industrial production surged. And Germany transformed itself into one of the most powerful military states in Europe. But there was another side to the story. Much of this growth was built upon foundations that were far less stable than they appeared. Hidden debt, massive government spending, territorial expansion, and the exploitation of conquered populations. These were not temporary factors. They were essential parts of the system itself. The apparent prosperity depended on a constant flow of new resources, new territory, new assets, new victories. Without continuous expansion, the system could not sustain itself indefinitely.
And in the end,
The very strategy that helped fuel Germany's rise also helped drive its downfall. History often remembers great battles, famous generals, and dramatic military victories. But behind those events were financial decisions, economic pressures, and hidden systems operating far from the battlefield. Systems that quietly shaped the course of the 20th century. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Not every economic miracle is what it appears to be. Sometimes the success is real, but the costs are merely postponed. And sometimes the bill simply hasn't arrived yet. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of history, economics, and the hidden forces that shape world events, be sure to subscribe to Benzene Chorko and join us for more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines and the forces that changed our world.